Rain poured hard over Ife Gardens, turning the narrow street into shining puddles. Zuri Adebayo stood at the gate of her mother's house, holding her 3-year-old daughter tight against her chest. Mila's small arms were wrapped around Zuri's neck, her face buried in her mother's shoulder. The gate was open but the door wasn't. From inside the house, Adesela Adebayo's voice cut through the rain. Loud. Angry. You're a failure, Zuri, she shouted. At your age, look at you. One child, no husband, no future. Neighbors slowed down. Some stopped completely. Curtains moved. Eyes watched. Zuri felt her face burn not from the rain, but from shame. Please, Mama, Zuri said softly, her voice shaking. Just tonight. Mila is cold. I'll leave in the morning. Adesela stepped closer to the door. You will not ruin my house with your bad luck, she snapped. You made your choices. Go and suffer outside. Mila lifted her head, tears mixing with rain. She looked at the door and asked in a small, confused voice, Mommy, why Grandma angry? Zuri couldn't answer. Her throat felt tight. The door slammed shut. Hard. Final. Zuri stood there for a moment, frozen, listening to the rain and the silence that followed. Then she adjusted the small bag on her shoulder, the only thing she carried, and turned away from the house she once called home. As she walked down the dark street, holding Mila close, her hand brushed against something stiff inside the bag. Papers. Important ones. Zuri looked ahead, not back. Everyone thought she had nothing left. They were very wrong. Zuri Adebayo had always felt like she was living in someone else's story, one where she was the mistake everyone whispered about. Growing up in Ife Gardens, her mother Adesela made it clear who the favorite was. Her younger brother Tund could do no wrong. Every achievement, every smile, every step forward was celebrated. Zuri? She was the disappointment. The words stuck to her like a shadow even as she grew older. Life hadn't made things easier. Her marriage ended in heartbreak and fear. The man she had trusted had turned controlling and cruel. By the time she left, she was alone with Mila, barely 3 years old, carrying a mix of relief and exhaustion. Every visit home reminded her of her failures. You need us to survive, Zuri, her mother would say, as if reminding her she was nothing without them. Those words cut deeper than any argument. But Zuri had learned to fight quietly. She worked 2 jobs, one during the day, one at night, never letting anyone know how she was scraping by. She never bragged, never asked for sympathy, just kept her small victories tucked close like secrets. In her bag, hidden beneath Mila's clothes, was something far bigger than coins or receipts. Something that, if revealed, could change everything. At work, she smiled politely when colleagues teased her about being helpless. At the market, she nodded when neighbors whispered about how poor she looked. No one suspected that behind her tired eyes and quiet demeanor, Zuri was building a life stronger than anyone imagined. Every small decision, every sacrifice, every long night of labor had a purpose. And now, holding Mila in her arms, she carried not just her daughter but a secret that would flip the story everyone thought they knew. Zuri wasn't just surviving. She was preparing to show them she had been winning all along in ways they could never see. For years she had hidden in the shadows. But soon, everything they used against her would be the very thing that set her free. The neon sign of Ajala Transit Motel flickered as Zuri pushed the door open, holding Mila close. The room smelled of damp carpet and air freshener, cheap but safe for one night. Mila's small body shivered against her mother's chest, her little fingers clutching Zuri's hand. Mommy, I don't like this place, Mila murmured, her voice small and tired. I know, baby. Just for tonight. Tomorrow will be okay, Zuri whispered back, forcing a smile she didn't feel. She set Mila on the narrow bed, covering her with the thin blanket. Within minutes, the little girl had curled up with Zuri's coat, hugging it like a shield against the strange room. Zuri sat in the corner, exhausted and soaked from the rain earlier. Her chest ached, not from hunger or fatigue, but from the weight of humiliation, rejection, and the endless memories her mother's words had dragged out of her. She closed her eyes and let herself break down silently. No one would see her cry. Not here, not now. Her hand brushed against the bag she'd carried all evening. She pulled out an envelope, worn and heavy with importance. Inside were papers she had hidden for years, papers no one knew existed. Her eyes scanned the first line, then froze. The house address. Her heart skipped a beat. It was the same house her mother had just kicked her out of. The very walls where Adesela had screamed at her. The same door that slammed in her face. And in bold letters on the official document, Zuri Adebayo, homeowner. A wave of disbelief and quiet satisfaction washed over her. All the anger, shame, and fear of the night seemed to focus into one sharp clarity. Her mother didn't just humiliate her. She had unknowingly humiliated the owner of the house. Zuri sank back onto the chair, holding Mila's sleeping body close. The room was silent except for the soft rise and fall of her daughter's breathing. She could feel the secret she had carried for so long beginning to pulse with power, ready to change everything. And as she traced the letters of her name on the papers, memories flooded back. How this house became hers, how she had quietly saved it, and how all the pieces of her life had led to this night. The flashback began, revealing the truth no one had suspected, and the moment when Zuri had turned from the failure in her mother's eyes to someone unstoppable. Years ago, the house in Ife Gardens had been on the edge of disaster. Adesla Adebayo had fallen behind on the mortgage, and Zuri remembered the panic in her mother's eyes when the bank threatened repossession. She had rushed over, a younger version of herself, heart pounding as her mother pleaded, "Please, I don't know what I'll do. You have to help me." Zuri had looked at the papers, at the looming numbers that could swallow her family's home, and felt something stir deep inside her. She knew she could help. She had the money quietly saved from years of work, never bragged, never spoken of it. Without hesitation, she paid the down payment herself, keeping the transaction secret. She arranged for the mortgage to be placed under her own name, not her mother's, to protect the family's credit and dignity. Her mother had promised, with tears and gratitude, that things would change. "I will respect you, Zuri. I will never take you for granted again," she had said. But the promises faded into the same pattern of belittlement and control that had always haunted Zuri. The sacrifices she made were never acknowledged. She stayed silent, carrying the weight of the secret alone, protecting the family's pride while hiding the truth. Now, standing outside the very house she had saved, feeling the sting of rejection and humiliation, Zuri understood the depth of the betrayal. She had given everything to keep her mother's world intact, and yet that same mother had thrown her and Mila out into the rain, acting as if she owned something she never truly did. The stakes had never been higher. Zuri wasn't just a hurt daughter now. She was the rightful owner of the house, the one with power quietly held in her hands all along. The realization hit hard. Every insult, every scream, every moment of failure her mother had forced upon her was meaningless against the truth she carried. What had started as an act of love and protection had become the quiet foundation of her coming victory. And as the rain washed over Ife Gardens that night, Zuri felt a cold clarity settle inside her. She would no longer be powerless, and the people who had underestimated her would soon learn the truth. The next morning, sunlight barely broke through the clouds over Ife Gardens, but inside Adesela's house the storm had already begun. A sharp knock echoed at the door. Adesela frowned. "Who could that be so early?" she muttered. The bank officer stepped in, briefcase in hand, professional and calm. He flipped through papers and smiled politely. "Good morning, ma'am. I just need the homeowner's signature here to finalize a routine update." His eyes flicked to Adesela, then paused. "Ah, it says here the homeowner is Zuri Adebayo." Adesela laughed nervously, waving a hand. "Oh, that's a mistake, my daughter. She couldn't possibly own this house." The officer didn't flinch. He repeated the request for the signature. "Ma'am, I'm afraid it's not a mistake. The records are very clear. The homeowner is Zuri Adebayo. She's listed as responsible for the mortgage." For a moment Adesela froze. Her laughter faltered, replaced by a creeping panic that clawed at her chest. The edges of the paper seemed to burn in her hands. She tried to keep control, dialing her daughter's number rapidly. "Zuri? Zuri, pick up." No answer. The line went straight to voicemail. She called again. And again. Nothing. Her face paled. The neighbors outside probably noticed her hands shaking, the sudden loss of the confident air she usually carried. For the first time in decades she didn't have the power. The house she had flaunted, the authority she had wielded over Zuri and Mila, the fear she had relied on, all of it slipped through her fingers in slow, terrifying clarity. The officer waited patiently, scanning the room, unaware of the drama unfolding. Adesela's eyes darted to the door, to the walls she had once controlled, and finally back to the papers. Her mind raced. How could this be? How had she missed it? Outside, the world went on, but inside that house, the first cracks in Adesela's lies had begun to show. The power was shifting. And for the first time, Zuri was the one holding the cards, even if her mother didn't yet know it. The humiliation that Adesela had so often poured on her daughter was about to come full circle, and the tables were turning faster than anyone could imagine. Adesela Adebayo stormed into the Ikeja Housing Authority, her heels clicking angrily on the polished floor. Rain from the previous night had left her hair damp, her face flushed with fury. "This is unacceptable," she snapped at the clerk behind the counter. "I want answers now. My daughter, Zuri, she doesn't own that house." The clerk, calm and unbothered, tapped on the keyboard and printed a fresh set of documents. Sliding them across the counter, he said softly, "Ma'am, these are the official records. The owner of the property at Ife Gardens is Zuri Adebayo. The mortgage is almost fully paid." Adesela's laughter began nervously, a high-pitched, forced sound. But as her eyes scanned the papers, the color drained from her face. Her legs trembled. She gripped the edge of the counter to steady herself. The reality hit like a tidal wave. She had kicked out the rightful owner of her own house, her own daughter. For the first time, the power she had wielded for years crumbled in front of her. The irony was sharp, almost cruel. The woman she had treated as a failure, screamed at, humiliated, and banished into the rain, was the one who had quietly saved the house all those years ago. And now Adesela was standing there, powerless, exposed, and utterly humiliated. The clerk didn't flinch. He simply waited, letting the truth sink in. Adesela's hands shook as she touched the papers, unable to reconcile the years of pride and control with this new, undeniable fact. Around her, a few other visitors glanced up, sensing the tension, though none could have imagined the full story behind the documents. Outside, the streets of Ikeja went on as usual, but inside that office, history had shifted in a single moment. The daughter who had been underestimated, mocked, and thrown out, had quietly become untouchable. Adesela's knees buckled slightly, and she slumped into a chair behind the counter, unable to stand. Zuri's quiet patience, her hidden strength, and her years of sacrifice had culminated in this viral moment of justice. The audience of neighbors, clerks, and even future readers could feel it. The tables had turned and the failure had won without a single shout. The house that Adesela thought she owned was never hers. And now, for everyone watching, the truth was impossible to ignore. The soft buzz of rain on the motel roof had settled into silence when a frantic knock broke the quiet. Zuri looked up from where she was folding a small stack of clothes. Adesela stood at the door, soaked, her face streaked with tears and makeup running from crying too hard. "Zuri, please, open the door," her mother begged, voice cracking. I didn't mean it. Mila stirred in her sleep, opening one eye. She squinted at the woman and whispered, "Mommy? Grandma?" But before Zuri could answer, the little girl ducked behind the coat she had been hugging all night. She knew something was wrong and instinctively she wanted to hide. Zuri didn't move to open the door. She stayed still, listening as her mother's voice trembled, filled with desperation. "Think of the family, Zuri," Adesela cried, her words echoing down the narrow hallway. "You can't just throw away your mother. Think about tradition, think about respect, think about us." Zuri's hands rested calmly on the counter, Mila's small fingers peeking out from the blanket. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She didn't panic. She had done enough of that in her life. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but cutting through every word her mother had ever used against her. "You already did." The words hit hard, sharper than any slap, and in that instant the power dynamic shifted completely. Adesela's shoulders sagged, and the anger in her eyes flickered into stunned silence. She realized painfully that all the years she had used guilt, shame, and favoritism to control Zuri had already failed. The daughter she had tried to belittle and humiliate had already broken free. Zuri glanced down at Mila, seeing the little girl peek out cautiously, still unsure. She pulled Mila close, wrapping her in the warmth of her own arms. No apology could undo what had been done, but Zuri didn't need to yell or fight. Her quiet strength said it all. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside that small motel room, a new reality settled in. The mother who had slammed doors, shouted, and humiliated her daughter was powerless now. And the daughter, the one who had endured years of betrayal, had finally found her voice, and her silence spoke louder than any words ever could. Zuri Adebayo stood at the gate of her own house in Ife Gardens, holding the eviction notice like a shield. She had waited for the right moment, followed the law, and now she was ready. Her mother, Adesela, stared at her in disbelief, eyes wide and mouth open. This is your house?" Adesela asked, her voice trembling between anger and shock. "Yes, Mama. Zuri said calmly, handing her mother the official papers. You have 60 days to move out. That's all the law requires. I'm giving you time to make arrangements. Her words were firm but measured, not cruel. She wasn't angry, she was steady in control. Mila tugged at her hand, eyes wide, watching her mother with a mix of curiosity and pride. For the first time she saw Zuri as strong, not just someone who had been pushed around. Word spread fast. Family members called, some siding with Adesila, others whispering behind Zuri's back. She's heartless, they said. How can she treat her own mother like this? Zuri heard it all, but she didn't flinch. She had spent too many years being the weak one, the one who had to endure insults, threats, and control. No more. She was breaking the cycle of fear and abuse that had ruled her family for generations. Adesila tried pleading, bargaining, crying, but Zuri remained calm, her voice steady. She explained the law, the rights, the facts. She reminded her mother that respect had to be earned, not demanded. Mila watched quietly from the side, hiding behind her mother's legs, but she understood more than her years could explain. She saw a mother who had been hurt and ignored rise up with quiet power. She saw a woman who refused to let history repeat itself. As the days passed, Adesila moved into a relative's home, bitter but powerless. Family gossip continued, but inside the walls of the house, peace began to settle. Zuri could finally breathe, knowing she had stood for herself and for Mila. The eviction notice wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a line drawn in the sand. A signal that the old rules of control, fear, and humiliation no longer applied. Zuri had broken the chain. And Mila, watching her mother, was learning the most important lesson of all. Strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it stands quietly, unwavering, and changes everything. The moving truck pulled up to Emerald View Estate in Lekki, shining under the warm afternoon sun. Zuri stepped out, holding Mila's hand, feeling a strange mix of excitement and relief. This wasn't just a new apartment. It was a new beginning. No yelling, no insults, no shame. Just her and Mila finally free. The first thing Zuri did was set up Mila's room. She unpacked the little girl's toys, arranged her clothes neatly, and picked out a soft pink blanket for the bed. Mila's eyes lit up as she saw her own space for the first time. A place that belonged to her completely, where she could play, sleep, and feel safe. "Mommy, it's ours?" she asked, her voice full of wonder. "Yes, baby. All ours," Zuri whispered, smiling as she hugged her daughter. The apartment was small but bright, with windows that let in the morning sun and a view of the estate's green gardens. Zuri moved slowly, taking her time, placing her favorite books on the shelves, a few pictures of her and Mila on the walls, and making the space feel like home. Every corner, every shelf was theirs. She finally allowed herself to breathe. Meanwhile, Adesila had moved in with relatives, still muttering complaints and trying to grasp what had happened. But Zuri didn't care. The chaos, the shouting, the fear, they were all behind her now. Outside the apartment, the estate was calm. Inside, silence replaced the tension that had once filled every room she had known. That night, Zuri tucked Mila into her own little bed, listening to the soft breathing of her daughter. She sat in the living room for a while, savoring the quiet. No one was judging her. No one was screaming. No one was trying to control her. The air felt lighter, the future brighter. For the first time in years, Zuri felt at peace. This apartment wasn't just a place to live. It was proof that she had taken back her life. She had set the rules, and for once those rules protected her and Mila. As she turned off the lights, Zuri smiled to herself. She had built a home where love, respect, and safety came first. And in that moment, surrounded by silence and hope, she finally knew what it felt like to truly be free. Months had passed since Zuri and Mila had moved into Emerald View Estate, and life had finally settled into a quiet rhythm. One afternoon, Adesila showed up at the apartment, hesitant, her eyes softer than Zuri had ever seen. The anger and pride were gone, replaced by something heavier. Admission. I was wrong, Zuri, her mother said, voice trembling. I let jealousy and control guide me for too long. I pushed you, humiliated you, and I am sorry. Zuri listened quietly. There was no rush to respond, no anger bubbling up. She didn't need revenge. Years of being controlled and belittled had taught her that strength wasn't about hurting others. It was about setting boundaries. I accept your apology, Mama, Zuri said calmly. But some things can't happen again. We respect each other or we stay apart. Her words were firm, kind, and final. Adesila nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. She didn't argue, didn't make excuses. For once, Zuri could see understanding in her mother's face, a tiny acknowledgement of the truth she had lived for so long. Later that day, Zuri sat at the table with the final mortgage statement in front of her. Her pen hovered for a moment, then she signed it. The house was officially and finally, completely hers. Mila, sitting nearby, looked up with wide, curious eyes. "Mommy, this our house?" Zuri smiled, a warm, triumphant smile that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with freedom. She pulled Mila close and whispered, "Yes, baby. All ours. No one can ever throw us out again." For the first time in her life, Zuri felt the quiet power of owning her space, her life, and her choices. The lessons of the past, humiliation, control, betrayal, were gone. What remained was peace, safety, and the knowledge that she had broken the chain of abuse for herself and for Mila. And in that moment, surrounded by the soft laughter of her daughter, Zuri knew they were finally home.